Good afternoon, everyone. This is Len Stewart bringing you another installment of Goffstown Today, which is a local public affairs program that's brought to you by the Goffstown Democratic Committee. Our goal in this continuing series is to provide some meaningful information and discussion of local and state issues of importance to the greater Goffstown community and to the state of New Hampshire. Our special guest today, who's going to be speaking on some important statewide energy issues, is D. Maurice Kreis, also known as Don Kreis. He is New Hampshire's consumer advocate. Mr. Kreis is a former journalist, a law professor who specialized in energy law and policies, and a former general counsel for the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission. He heads a small state agency that represents the interests of the state's residential utility customers in proceedings before the Public Utilities Commission and various other regional energy regulators. During the last legislative session, there were a number of important energy-related bills vetoed by Governor Chris Sununu, including a bipartisan measure on net metering, something that would have allowed customers who generate electricity themselves to sell more of their excess power back to the grid. Net metering seems very likely to come up again in the 2021 session, along with a lot of other important energy efficiency and conservation measures. So let's let Mr. Kreis explain it all to us. Thank you for being here today, sir, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, and hello, Goffstown. It's a great pleasure to be here, if only virtually, because Goffstown is one of my favorite places, at least in New Hampshire. And I do want to start with a bit of a disclaimer, and that is that I am a ham, and so I accept every speaking engagement offered to me, including partisan groups like this one. I am a resolutely nonpartisan public official, so I've accepted invitations from Republican groups and Democratic groups, and it just is, from my standpoint, an opportunity to explain what I do to anybody who's interested. I would like to start with some basic principles, and please forgive me if I'm telling you things you already know. But our utilities in New Hampshire, meaning the companies that provide you with electricity like Eversource, gas service like Liberty and Unitil, and water like Aquarian Water, are regulated monopolies with rates that are set by the Public Utilities Commission in a way that's intended to mimic what competitive prices would look like. And by statute, the Public Utilities Commission is, quote, the arbiter between the interests of the customer and the interests of the regulated utilities. Well, as you might imagine, the utilities and their shareholders are very well represented at the PUC. So my office, the Office of the Consumer Advocate, represents the interests of residential customers at the PUC, pursuant to our statute. And the idea there is that we put a little bit of, I guess you would say, weight on the other side of the scale. So there are 5 of us at the PUC. There's me. There's my deputy consumer advocate, Pradeep Chattopadhyay, who is a PhD economist. My director of finance is Jim Brennan. He also is a former PUC analyst. My staff attorney is Krista Shute. She used to work for the Institute for Energy and the Environment at Vermont Law School. And we have a body called the Residential Ratepayers Advisory Board, which meets quarterly. It has 9 people on it. It is designed to keep us honest with respect to being in touch with our constituency. And they also play a role in determining whether I get reappointed or appointed in the first place. Now, I want to explain who we aren't. The Site Evaluation Committee decides whether to allow construction of major energy facilities in New Hampshire, like the Northern Pass project that got rejected a couple of years ago. Appearing before that body is something called the Council for the Public. It represents the public in seeking to protect the quality of the environment and in seeking to assure an adequate supply of energy. That is totally different than what I do. The Site Evaluation Committee is like kryptonite to me, and I just don't go there. Yes. So let me give you a brief history of electricity in New Hampshire, going all the way back to Samuel Insull, who lived from 1859 to 1938. He was a conniving empire builder who started out as the secretary to Thomas Edison, and he eventually built a nationwide empire of monopoly electric companies and came up with the clever idea to ask for state regulation as a way of avoiding making bribes to municipalities. Um, and he eventually came to own Public Service Company of New Hampshire, basically any utility with the words public service in it. In the 1930s, in order to break up that monopoly, nationwide monopoly, basically, Congress passed into law and President Roosevelt signed the Public Utility Holding Company Act and also the Rural Electrification Act, which created the nation's network of electric cooperatives. Now, if you fast forward to 1978, during the Carter administration, our own Senator John Durkin was instrumental in getting President Carter to sign a statute called the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act. And that had the effect of opening up the electricity grid for the first time to non-utility producers of electricity. And here in New Hampshire, those were the wood burning power plants and the trash burning power plants. Now, as Len alluded to before, 1988 was the big bang when it comes to electricity in New Hampshire. And by that, I mean the bankruptcy of Public Service Company in New Hampshire, related entirely and caused entirely by that company's clinging obdurately to its investment in the Seabrook nuclear power plant, which took them, gosh, something like 15 years to build. And since they couldn't put it into rates, for all those years, it eventually drove them into bankruptcy. Then in 1992, Congress passed the Energy Policy Act, which opened up the electricity grid even further to competitive suppliers and non-utility generators. In 1996, the New Hampshire legislature passed the Restructuring Act, which was designed to open up retail electricity supply to competition. That restructuring was finally completed in 2018 when Eversource sold off the last of its generation facilities. And back in 2007 or so, Eversource greenlighted a $400 million waste of ratepayer money by building a mercury scrubber at the Merrimack Station in Bow, which you can see when you drive up and down I-93. It's that $400 million in stranded costs that all of us are still paying. And of course, subsequent to that, we had the rejected Northern Pass project, the rejected Ned Pipeline project, and the rejected or the abandoned Access Northeast Pipeline project. There was a scheme several years ago when I first took office that Eversource launched. This has to do with the Access Northeast project to put the costs of natural gas pipeline development into your electric distribution rates. We successfully convinced the Public Utilities Commission that that was inconsistent with the Restructuring Act, but unfortunately we were overturned by the New Hampshire Supreme Court. And I know we were right, and I know we made the right argument because Justice Hicks, in his dissenting opinion, agreed with us. So the right argument was there, it just didn't capture a majority of the court. Nevertheless, losing that case was one of my major accomplishments. And since then, what have we been able to accomplish at the Office of the Consumer Advocate? Well, we helped persuade the Public Utilities Commission to adopt a so-called energy efficiency resource standard that commits the state to all cost-effective energy efficiency. And I'll be talking a little bit about that in a minute, a little bit more about that, that is. We participated in the big net metering docket, and we helped limit the extent to which the costs of net metering are shifted from those who build net metering arrays to those who pay for the electricity. We worked with Liberty Utilities to create revenue decoupling, which is a way of making sure that when we account for the effects of energy efficiency on the rates that utility customers pay and make the utility whole, we do it in a fair and symmetrical way. So that was a big reform. We settled that proceeding with Liberty, and 4 electric rate cases while limiting rate increases and reliance on fixed charges, which are horrible for residential customers. The most recent rate case settlement was the one we signed with Eversource that is still awaiting commission approval. We worked with Liberty Utilities on a battery storage and time of use rate pilot project, which is really cool. And we convinced, Len mentioned bills that Governor Sununu vetoed, but he also signed two really great energy bills into law last year while he was vetoing all those other bills. And one of them was Senate Bill 286, which is the statewide utility data platform bill that we wrote and championed. And it would create, or it tells the PUC to work with the utilities to create a platform that would give every utility customer in the state access to their data, which they can share with providers of innovative energy services and thereby improve their lot in life when it comes to energy supply. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about grid modernization. Um, there's a lot of new technology out there, and it tends to enable customers to do more and have more freedom when it comes to their use of the electricity grid. And as a result, the PUC, gosh, 6 years ago now, I think, opened up a grid modernization investigative docket. And lo and behold, after a long time, back in May, the commission issued a really cool, excellent order, probably the best order the PUC has adopted since I became the consumer advocate. And it did some really important things. One of the things it did was it refused to buy this distinction between investments in grid modernization technologies and so-called business as usual technologies. And the commission, I think, recognized something that I heartily agree with, which is employing the best available technology is really part of the utility's pre-existing obligation to provide safe and reliable service at the lowest possible cost. And so the commission said, look, we're not going to subject your grid modern investments to a different regulatory regime that means less scrutiny. We're going to scrutinize everything in the same way. And we're going to open up and democratize the process by which you plan your capital investments so stakeholders can actually work with you to decide how to prioritize where you deploy your capital in a way that's going to make the electricity grid better for everybody. Well, that was a bridge too far for the utilities. So Eversource and Unitil filed a rehearing motion that is still pending at the PUC. The PUC suspended the effect of its grid modernization order, and I expect any day now for the PUC to issue an order either granting or rejecting the rehearing request. If they grant the rehearing request and redo their grid mod order, that'll be bad for customers. If they reaffirm their grid modernization order, then it's likely the utilities will appeal to the New Hampshire Supreme Court and we'll get to argue about grid modernization there. The court is historically reluctant to overturn or disagree, that is, with what the big utilities want. This very week, starting on Thursday, we have a huge hearing pending at the Public Utilities Commission that has to do with the plan for our energy efficiency resource standard for the 3 years that begin on January 1st. Back in 2016, the PUC approved this paradigm of all cost-effective energy efficiency. Then in 2017, the commission approved the initial 3-year plan for implementing the energy efficiency resource standard. And we now have pending in front of the commission the proposed energy efficiency resource standard plan for the next 3 years, starting in 2021. There was a big stakeholder collaborative process that unfolded over the summer that I had the opportunity to preside at. And as a result of that, all of the stakeholders, meaning ratepayer advocates and environmental groups and other people that care about energy efficiency, were able to work with the utilities that deliver the energy efficiency programs and agree on an ambitious energy efficiency plan that would mean saving 5% of electric sales over that 3 years and 3% of our natural gas sales over the 3 years. And that I think would have the effect of delivering enough negawatts to New Hampshire customers in lieu of megawatts that we would finally get back into the mainstream of the region. Because right now, New Hampshire is dead last in all of the Northeast until you get to Delaware when it comes to delivering energy efficiency. So we embrace that plan. The utilities filed it for the commission's approval back on September 1st, and now we are fighting to defend that plan. And there are three strikes against it. Strike one was a letter that the incoming Speaker of the House and a group of Republican members of the House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee filed with the PUC recently, asking the commission to reject the plan and not allow for any ramped up commitment to energy efficiency because they contend it would be too expensive. That was strike one. Strike two was a letter filed by the Business and Industry Association. That's a big trade association that represents big commercial users of energy. Their representative actually voted in favor of this plan when it came up for a vote in front of the Energy Efficiency Resource Standard Committee back in August. But then the Business and Industry Association turned around and wrote a letter to the PUC saying that the plan should be rejected. So that was strike two. And then strike three is that the commission's own staff of analysts from their electric division are also trying to convince the commission not to adopt the plan. Those three things are a mortal threat to this plan, and we intend to go in front of the commission and defend that plan in 3 days of hearings that start on Thursday. I have a witness testifying on behalf of the PUC, and we entered into a settlement agreement that was designed to meet some of these concerns that have been presented by some of these skeptics. And what we did in particular is we dialed back the extent to which big commercial and industrial customers will see their energy efficiency charges increased in exchange for much more opportunity to save money on energy efficiency. The commercial and industrial sector, or at least some of it, is pretty skeptical about that. So we dialed back from 5% to 4.5% savings goal for electricity over the 3 years. And that reduction from 5% to 4.5% was intended largely to meet this concern that we're asking too much of our commercial and industrial customers. I don't think we are asking too much of them because we require all of our ratepayer funded energy efficiency to be cost effective from the standpoint of all ratepayers. So by definition, every tenth of a cent that we invest in energy efficiency, and by that I mean every tenth of a cent of ratepayer money that we all pay on our electric and natural gas bills, is going to eventually return more savings back to us than we invested in those charges we paid on our electric bills. So we should push that as far as we can. Now, the argument that we've been getting against it is, oh gosh, we are in the midst of a horrible pandemic and the state is in an economic crisis as the result of the pandemic. And of course, I know that that's true. But in our opinion, a crisis like that is actually a reason to double down on energy efficiency. Why? Well, A, it saves people money, and B, it's an economic stimulus package, right? I mean, you pay for it on your electric bill, but you get the savings back. So it's really a kind of a pump priming, and it puts lots of people to work. You don't have to have a PhD or an MD or a JD like I do in order to work as an installer of energy efficiency measures. And so it's a great opportunity for working class people to find really well paying, really great jobs in which they get to do something that's good for the environment. It's good for ratepayers and customers, and it's great for the economy. Why? Because all of the wealth generated by energy efficiency measures stays right here in state. If you invest in weatherizing homes, it means they're buying less fossil fuels, and so they're paying for less fuel that involves buying well or exporting wealth to places that produce fossil fuels. That's good for the New Hampshire economy, and it also tends to make us more competitive with our neighboring states, particularly Massachusetts, which is the top-rated state for energy efficiency all across the country. And it means that people will be more likely to want to locate here, businesses will be more likely to want to invest here, and it's good. So this is the perfect time to do that and double down on our commitment to energy efficiency. And I think that the opponents of ratepayer funded energy efficiency are using the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to push their ideological opposition to an initiative like this? Well, their ideological opposition is grounded in in a belief in free markets, I guess. And it is true that ratepayer-funded energy efficiency does put the thumb on the scale in favor of energy efficiency, and it rejects the premise that we should just rely on market forces to cause people naturally to invest in energy efficiency. There are all sorts of market barriers. The energy efficiency resource standard programs overcome those market barriers, and they are available to you via the NH Saves program. So all you have to do is go on the web, type in nhsaves.com, and it'll take you right to the website, and you can figure out what's available right in Goffstown for your business or your home. I've been encouraging people to write to puc@puc.nh.gov, mention docket number DE20092, and ask the Commission to reaffirm its commitment to all cost-effective energy efficiency by approving the settlement agreement that I signed with the utilities that implements a slightly scaled back version of the energy efficiency resource standard plan that we developed with the utilities over the summer. Okay,
If I may pose a question, I'm
you may.
presuming the same kind of objection or the same line of objection is the reason for the opposition to participation in the regional greenhouse gas initiative.
Well, yes. I mean, that's a sort of a somewhat different but related argument. You know, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is, I think, a successful effort to monetize the cost of carbon emissions, and then in an efficient way, causing the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that program has been successful. Um, I like the energy efficiency programs even better than Reggie, because the cheapest way of serving the next unit of demand is energy efficiency. Negawatts are always cheaper than megawatts, at least for the foreseeable future. So the best way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions is by not using that next unit of energy. It's a win-win all around.
Mhm. Let me also pose another question, which is kind of a follow-up. You mentioned the fact that we are still, and it's now what, 32 plus years after the bankruptcy, that we are still, ratepayers are still getting hit with the stranded costs of Seabrook, of the other projects. What's the timeline on it? Are our grandchildren finally going to pay that off, or does it go even further out than that?
Well, you know, uh, the reality is that we have paid off our stranded cost obligation with respect to Seabrook. I still think that Seabrook sort of resounds through energy policy in New Hampshire and I called it the Big Bang. And so we're still feeling echoes of that. And the echo that I perceive that's directly relevant is this idea that utilities can spend money in a foolish way and then basically come back around and get customers to bail them out. So you saw that Eversource, when it still owned Merrimack Station, decided to build a mercury scrubber, and they claim that the legislature told them to do it. What the legislature told them to do was either shut the plant down or build a mercury scrubber. And it turned out that the more economically prudent thing to have done back in 2007, given where natural gas prices were going and a bunch of other economic realities, would have been to just shut the plant down rather than double down on it by investing another $425 million in the plant by building a mercury scrubber. So, as a part of the process of divesting those assets and selling them to a non-utility, there was a settlement agreement that my predecessor signed in 2015, and the agreement was that customers would be responsible for 400 million of those $425 million in stranded costs, and Eversource had to eat that remaining 25 million. Well, that's a pretty asymmetrical resolution to that problem, and and you see it come up all the time. We're in a regional electricity market, so our wholesale electricity is now regulated regionally under the aegis of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And it's supposedly a competitive market, but then all of a sudden, this huge natural gas plant just north of Boston called Mystic Station pops up and says, oh, if you don't give us free money, we're going to close our plant. And that's going to cause, a big reliability crisis in New England. Well, the regional grid operator bought that argument. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission bought that argument. And so now we're shoveling free money in a similar vein out to the owners of that plant. And on it goes. Basically, it's a heads I win, tails you lose proposition where, the big generation owners and the big utilities and the big transmission owners want the benefit of a free market economy when it means more money for them. But when it means that the risk that they took turn out to be improvident and they might have to just shut down or go away or declare bankruptcy, then they want bailouts and they seem to get them. So it's a never ending thing. And the label is always stranded costs. That's just.
All right. Well, the perfect segue into the fact that we've got about 2 minutes left. So if you have any wrap-up remarks you would like to offer, we would love to hear them. I want to thank you on behalf of the town and of the Goffstown Democrats for your participation today. I have learned a great deal about utilities that I didn't know before.
Well, and I've just barely scratched the surface. I really like it when customers, consumers, get active at the Public Utilities Commission. And of course, I appear there all the time. But what I also like to do is help individual customers and individual grassroots organizations and just regular people make their voice heard at the Public Utilities Commission. So anytime you think that there is some matter pending at the PUC that you would like to become involved in, I'm available to you to give you some hints about how to participate meaningfully. It can be complicated and the rules can be somewhat Byzantine, but it is possible to have a meaningful influence on the PUC. And I'm at your service, meaning anybody in Goffstown wants some assistance getting there and doing that. Please feel free to contact me. I'm easy to find. And my website is oca.nh.gov. So all you have to do is click there and you can find your way to how to get in touch with me.
All right. Well, Mr. Kreis, thank you so much for your participation today. Just in parting, just to let you folks watching out there know that you can get these programs here on Goffstown EV. They're going to be available also through the video page on our website, goffstowndems.com. You can search for Goffstown Democrats YouTube channel, or you'll occasionally see them on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/GoffstownDems. Please like them, please share them widely, and thank you all very much for watching. Thank you and good night.